between money mindset and wealth identity, and how those two things play together to create speed and ease in the scale of your business. Today, I want to teach you about judgments and why breaking judgments or shifting judgments is one of the literal most lucrative skill sets that you can ever learn. When it comes to your business, this is a skill like that you definitely want. So I'm Bree Sedano. I'm a personal finance expert, the founder of Cash Confident, and I work with service-based businesswomen to scale their businesses. All right. So are you ready? All right. So you downloaded a workbook called the Identity Upgrade Workbook, I don't know, very recently, and that's why you're getting this video. So maybe like the second or third page, it's called Be a Petty Bitch, right? And we start to go over our judgments. So I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what judgments are, how they impact us, and then we're going to get into that activity so that way you could start to break down your own judgments and open up so much money into your business. All right. So judgments stop a flow of energy. Judgments in the mental realm, like if you've ever talked to somebody and you could tell you said something that bumped up against their judgment and all of a sudden like they hit a wall, or maybe it's you've hit a wall. That's what energy feels like when you've hit a judgment in the mental realm. Judgment in an emotional realm, it will create more resistance. So let's just say I want, in order to scale your business, you're going to have to sell. But when you're selling, you feel like it's wrong or bad. You feel like you don't want to bother people, something's wrong. And so you may resist your sales activities. It may feel like, ooh, like I don't want to. It feels bad. It feels gross. So that's what that would feel like, in the emotional realm, which actually impacts the actions. The emotional realm almost always impacts the actions. And then sometimes there's just not an emotional, like it's not a big emotional decision, like, oh, I'd have to feel this way. It's just like something's like literally like, oh, I'm not doing that. And that's on the physical realm. You're not going to take the action. So judgments stop the flow of energy. Where this becomes a really, really big deal in your business is when you have on your identity, so things that are about you personally, things that are incongruent with what's required for you to scale. So I'm going to tell you a story to demonstrate this. So I had a client once who thought selling was, he actually called it like a douchebag thing. Like, so he's calling me. He's my client. His revenue's doing a roller coaster. He's paying everybody else first. Things aren't going super well in his business. Well, sometimes they would go super well and sometimes they wouldn't. And basically, the actions that are required for him to succeed, he's not doing consistently. And so I was like, well, so we start to get into it. And I was like, well, what's this about? And he's like, like, I just basically don't want to do it. And I was like, interesting. So anyways, I have him, we go through this activity where we judge somebody that he knows that works, in the same area of town that he does, doing something, the same thing, something similar. And he was like, well, so-and-so, he's like not a great guy. He's always selling. He's always self-promoting. He's kind of a douchebag, da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, all right. So when we look at it, so this judgment on his identity, so on this nice guy side of his judgment where he's willing to be, right? So he's got half of his identity open to him. So he's willing to be self-sacrificing. He's willing to be caring. He's willing to be, obviously like he sells like just a little bit. And I'm going to get to that in a second. He's willing to put others first. He's willing to do all this, but he's not willing to be shamelessly self-promoting. He's not willing to be salesy. He's not willing to consistently do his marketing activities. He's a little unwilling to raise his prices. He's kind of unwilling to pay himself first, because all of these things are on this bad guy side, right? This bad guy side. But really, that situation leads this man where, like, of course his business is going to be way out of balance because this aspect of his identity is way out of balance. So we start looking at this. And when we start to break this, when we start to shift this judgment down, well, actually, first we start to look at this judgment. We start to look at it like, all right, well, is it true that being self-promoting is really wrong or bad? And he's, he feels some kind of way about it. But the truth is like, you have to be shamelessly self-promotional if you're going to serve people. Like facts, right? Like if I'm not out here selling, promoting myself, I don't get to serve you, right? Because you're not banging down the door at my house to be like, Barista Dano, I need so much help, right? So if I'm not out in front of you, I don't get to serve you. So we start to look at it and I'm like, all right, so the shameless self-promotion means that you're in service. All right, and if you're not selling, are you serving? No, absolutely not. Like everybody who's not your customer, not your client, you're not serving. So this dude's out here in service. You say he's doing a worse job than you, but he's out here doing the thing and you're not, right? So we start looking at it. All right, and we can see that his willingness to pay everybody else first creates so much resentment in, it creates resentment in his business. It creates stress in his home life. And we're like, all right, well, if you were willing to shift that, how would that impact things? And he'd be like, well, I'd be less resentful in business. And here I am thinking, I'm like, also, you'll make more money in business because it's psychologically incongruent to do more work for no reward. Like it's a bad deal. If somebody else was like, hey, I'm going to need you to work way more, but for free, I'm going to need you to hold more responsibility and see more people and do more work, but you're going to keep getting nothing in return. You're going to be like, that's a bad deal, right? Even if that's you asking yourself for this thing. So anyways, as we start to see, the problem, right, was this judgment. The pain that it was causing was inconsistent revenue, not paying himself, the stress of that at home. And then we can start to see that problem was really just this one, it's this one judgment that says these are nice guy things and I'm allowed to be a nice guy. But these are bad guy things and I'm not allowed to be a bad guy. We see the consequence of that, right? We see the consequence in his money and his level of stress and his level of resentment, right? So then what we want to start breaking down that resentment, right? So I started teaching you how to look at this. And once you can kind of start to see what's going on, this is where we can really start to shift this. So as this person starts to break down these judgments, guess what happened to his revenue? Way up. Guess what happens to his stress? Way down. Guess what happens to his personal income? Up. Right? Guess what happens? His business starts getting easier because he's not constantly starting and stopping some new marketing thing, right? Because he would only allow himself to market when the stress of not having enough money was like so big that he could get over these judgments, right? But the judgment was still there, so it's just temporary. All right, so here's what I want you to do. Open up that workbook, and I don't have the workbook in front of me. I'm just going to talk you through it. So it's a short workbook. Just bear with me on the pages. So I want you to go through and I want you to look for somebody who's similar, who offers something similarly. And maybe like sometimes you watch their stuff and you're just like, oh, a little judgy. Now, I want to let you off the hook for this because what we're doing when we're looking for these judgments, it's not about the other person. You're not judging the other person at all, but you're seeing where you're not letting yourself be in the fullness of your identity, right? So we're doing this identity upgrade work. You're only allowing yourself to be on half of your identity, right? So in the example, I gave a coach that I've followed for years, and for such a long time, she triggered me, right? And I found her work to be some kind of way, lazy, incomplete, simple, right? And all right, so I'm going to just own all of this. And I'm going to say that this coach is very successful. Her business is bigger than mine. She's serving more people than me, right? Which burns a little bit to say. So for years when I would look at her work, I'd be like, this looks like it lacks substance. This looks too simple. And I purchased a couple of her things. And honestly, when I purchased them, I would judge her. I'd be like, this is so simple. This wasn't all that juicy. This wasn't super enlightening. Right? So I'm willing. So what does that mean? This isn't about her. I'm looking at her business through the lens of my judgments, right? I'm going to just point this out again because when we think that we're judging other people, we're not. We're just looking at them through the lens of our judgments, right? You might look at her and love her, be obsessed. She's wonderful. Because you and I may have different sets of judgments, right? So I have a tendency to overcomplicate things. I have a tendency to, I would not say like necessarily over deliver in a way that I tend to over deliver, but sometimes in a way that's just extraneous, right? This is something I've actually cleaned up in the past because it was more or less like driven by a little insecurity when you really, really look at it. So when I'm looking at this judgment that I have with this other teacher, I'm seeing, I let myself have things be complex, be complicated, but when they're simple, I'm like, oh no, I'm not into that. I let small program, something simple that's just an idea, I'm like not into that, but I'll create all of this complex, really long course material. And so as I look at those judgments, I can see she has so much more access to be successful because not everybody wants to buy a long course, right? Like some people are really into a really short video. And so she's serving those people where I'm like, here's this super big, complicated system. It's just like a lot. Right? And so as we start to really look at those judgments, we start to open up our identity. So what I want you to do is go into that workbook and find somebody that you judge and just start writing down the judgments that you hold against them and see if you can bring to your attention like, I'm willing to be this, but I'm not willing to be that. And we're going to do this. Obviously, we're not going to share this with the person. So you're going to throw your journal pages away because sometimes I honestly feel some kind of way about judging people. Even to share that with you that I was just judging this teacher. It's edgy for me. It's edgy, right? Because I judge that I'm judgmental. It's like a hilarious little thing. But when I'm willing to be judgmental, I can see those judgments and then I can shift those judgments. So as that judgment came down, I start to see, I could really offer simple things. So the next month I offer something super simple. I make a ton of money on it. It's something that's really easy to deliver and people really, really loved it, right? It was just a short container. It was a WhatsApp group and it was so good because I wasn't trying to solve every single money problem that could ever exist with one course, like maybe I had done in the past. So anyways, I'm hoping this is resonating with you. So I want you to go through, start to look where your judgments are and start to break them down. Follow the instructions in the book. And what I want you to understand is that anytime that you feel justification, that you feel guilt, or that you feel really resistant around taking an action, that's going to show you where your judgments are. But sometimes it can be hard to look inward for these sorts of things. So it's really advantageous to look outward because we're used to looking at the world through our own lens anyways, which includes all of our judgments. So go ahead, do this activity in the book. If you want, book a call with me. So I help people scale their business. But go ahead and book a call with me and let's talk about these judgments. Because when you can get these judgments down, I'm telling you, the level of money that comes from expanding the size of your identity, because as you do that, you're able to take actions that normally would have been so resistant to you. So if you're finding yourself in a lot of resistance around taking actions that you should be taking, right? Once I had a client who's a real estate agent, she had to make sales calls, but she thought she was going to be bothering people. So what would she do when it was time to make her sales calls? The time that she scheduled, the time that she got her kids away, the time that she'd clean the garage, she'd she'd declutter her kitchen drawers because it was the resistance. She didn't want to bother people. We broke that judgment down, $3,000 a month to $18,000 a month in a year. That's a life-changing amount of money. So I really, really want you to value this activity because there's so much good juiciness in it for how you perceive, for how you think, for what actions you take, for how you see the world. And as you expand your identity, you'll have more ability to take actions and still be okay. And also, I will add, as you break down judgments, you still have awareness. So I don't want you to think, if I break down my judgment, I'm not going to be able to see right from wrong. Yes, you will. You still have awareness. And you still have the ability to choose to do or not do something. But most of the time we have judgments that are in our way from our growth and expansion that are really not serving us. They're really not keeping us safe and they're really not serving the world. All right. I love you so much. I appreciate you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.